The engineer floated silently through the empty corridors of the alien ship. The hum of the ship's systems was faint, barely audible, but it carried an eerie echo that made the air feel heavier. Every surface was coated in dust, and the strange alien markings on the walls gave the place a cold, abandoned feeling. It was the kind of silence that pressed against your chest, making each step feel louder than it should be. He had spent days exploring this ship, searching for any signs of life or clues about why it had been left drifting in the void, far from any known space routes. So far, he had found nothing but empty rooms, broken equipment, and scattered debris. As he moved deeper into the cargo area, he noticed a faint sound that made him stop. It was soft, almost imperceptible, like the whimper of a creature too small to make much noise. He froze, listening carefully. The sound was definitely coming from somewhere ahead, behind a cluster of crates stacked haphazardly, as if they had been thrown aside in a hurry. The engineer's heart began to beat faster. In all his experience, he had never encountered an alien life form alone on a ship like this. Most of the time, encounters with alien species ended in danger or worse. But this sound, it carried something different: vulnerability, fear. He approached cautiously, his hands hovering near his tools in case he needed to defend himself. When he moved the crates aside, his eyes fell on a sight that made him catch his breath. There, in a small, dimly lit corner, was a baby alien dragon. It was no bigger than a large dog, with soft, mottled scales that shimmered faintly under the flickering lights. Its wings were small and folded tightly against its body, and a thin chain was wrapped around its leg, anchoring it to the floor. The chain had rusted in places, and the dragon's skin was raw and bruised where it had. Rubbed against the metal, the baby dragon's eyes were wide and filled with fear. They were an unusual color, a mix of deep amber and soft gold that seemed almost human in their expression. It hissed softly when it noticed the engineer, and a tiny puff of smoke escaped from its nostrils. Despite the small display of aggression, the dragon's body trembled, weak and exhausted. It was clear it had been abandoned for a long time. The engineer knelt a short distance away, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "It's okay," he whispered, even though he didn't know if the creature could understand him. "I'm not here to hurt you." For a moment, the dragon froze, its head tilting slightly as if studying him. Then it tried to stand, wobbling on its small legs, but it fell back with a weak grunt. The engineer's heart ached. He had dealt with machines, broken engines, and dangerous alien technology, but he had never felt the kind of helplessness that comes from seeing a young life left to die. He looked around the cargo hold, searching for anything that might help. There were remnants of supplies' metallic containers with alien markings he didn't understand, some cracked and empty, others still sealed. He didn't know if the contents were edible for the dragon, or even safe, but he knew he had to do something immediately. The creature couldn't survive on its own, not in the state it was in. The engineer carefully reached for the chain, his fingers brushing against the cold metal. The dragon's eyes narrowed, and it hissed again, small flames flickering from its nostrils. He froze, giving it space, speaking softly. "I just want to help. I won't hurt you." For what felt like an eternity, they simply stared at each other. The dragon's chest rose and fell unevenly as it struggled to breathe, and the engineer's mind raced. He remembered reading about alien species that could become aggressive when in pain or fear. But this wasn't aggression born of malice. It was instinct, the way any young creature would react to a potential threat. He had to gain its trust, and he had to do it quickly. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small container of nutrient paste he had carried for emergencies. It was meant for his own rations, but it was safe enough to try feeding the creature. He held it out slowly, letting the dragon see it without moving too close. The dragon's eyes followed the movement, and after a tense moment, it lowered its head slightly. It sniffed the paste, then hesitated, unsure whether it was safe. "You're hungry, I know," the engineer said softly. "I'm not going to take it away from you." Finally, the dragon's tiny tongue flicked out, tasting the paste. Its breathing became more even as it started to eat. The engineer watched carefully, making sure not to make any sudden movements. He could feel the creature relaxing, the tension in its small body easing slightly. For the first time since he found it, he allowed himself a small smile, even though the dragon was still weak. The moment marked the beginning of a fragile trust between them. The engineer realized that survival in deep space was not just about machines and technology. Sometimes it was about compassion, about recognizing life and doing everything in your power to protect it. He gently removed the chain, careful not to startle the dragon. The creature flinched, but didn't try to run. Its trust in him growing with each careful movement as he worked. The engineer noticed more signs of neglect, small scars along its wings, dirt embedded in its scales, and a faint, sickly odor that spoke of dehydration and starvation. He set about cleaning the wounds as best he could with the limited supplies he had. It was painstaking work, but he didn't rush. Every time the dragon flinched or hissed, he paused, speaking in low, soothing tones. By the time he finished, the baby dragon was curled against his side, exhausted but no longer struggling. For the first time in days, the engineer allowed himself to relax. He looked around the abandoned cargo hold, the silence now feeling less oppressive. Somewhere in the vastness of space, a life had been abandoned, left to die, but it wasn't going to die, not on his watch. The bond between them was fragile, but it was there, growing with every careful gesture and soft word. He settled the dragon on a makeshift platform he built from empty crates and padding, watching as it slowly began to breathe more steadily. The alien ship, once a place of emptiness and fear, now felt a little warmer, a little less abandoned. The engineer knew the journey ahead would be dangerous. He had no idea why the ship had been left adrift, or what other dangers might lurk within its metal walls. But for now, he focused on the small life before him, on the tiny creature that had already shown remarkable resilience despite its suffering. Night, or what passed for night, on a drifting alien vessel fell quietly. The engineer kept a soft vigil beside the baby dragon, listening to the low hum of the ship and the faint, rhythmic breathing of his new companion. Somewhere far away, in the blackness of space, the world seemed indifferent to the struggles of one human and one alien dragon. Yet here, in this forgotten corner, life was being protected, nurtured, and given a chance. He knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, feeding, healing, and keeping the creature safe. But for the first time, hope was present. The engineer leaned back against the wall, letting himself watch the small creature curl up, finally resting without fear. In the emptiness of the alien ship, a bond was forming, a silent promise that neither would face the void alone. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the cold metal walls and distant stars, the engineer understood something profound. Survival in space was not just about technology, about calculations and circuits. It was about empathy, courage, and the willingness to risk everything for life, no matter how strange or alien it might be. The ship was abandoned, the galaxy vast and indifferent, but for now they had each other. And that, the engineer knew, might just be enough. The next morning, the engineer woke to the faint warmth of the ship's artificial lights and the soft rustling of the baby dragon nearby. It was moving slightly, stretching its tiny wings and blinking in confusion as it adjusted to the presence of another being. The first night had been a small victory. The creature had eaten, rested, and survived without incident. But the engineer knew this was only the beginning. Feeding and protecting a baby alien dragon in the middle of a drifting alien ship was no easy task. Every day could bring new dangers, both from the ship itself and from the unknown world outside. He approached the little dragon slowly, speaking softly so as not to startle it. "Good morning," he said, offering a small container of nutrient paste again. The dragon sniffed cautiously before taking a few licks, its amber eyes watching him carefully. He noticed it seemed stronger than the day before, moving with a little more confidence, though its movements were still clumsy and unsure. The chains that had once bound it were gone, but the memory of pain and abandonment seemed to linger in its cautious glances and sudden flinches. The engineer realized that gaining trust would take time. It wasn't just about feeding it or cleaning its wounds. The creature had been abandoned, left to suffer alone, and that kind of fear ran deep. Patience would be as important as his tools or skills. He spent hours near it, speaking gently, occasionally extending a hand and letting it sniff or brush against his fingers. Sometimes it hissed or puffed out small flames in warning, and he had to step back, careful not to force the interaction. Other times it allowed brief contact, a small head nuzzle, or a brush of its wings against his arm. Those moments, brief as they were, felt like victories. While tending to the dragon, the engineer also explored the ship more carefully. He needed to understand the systems in case of emergencies. The ship was old and neglected, lights flickering in some sections, alarms occasionally buzzing without reason. Strange alien devices lined the walls, some still operational, others cracked or sparking dangerously. Every step was a reminder of how precarious their situation was. The baby dragon followed him with curiosity at a safe distance, its small body agile despite weakness. Occasionally it would hiss or leap in fright at a sudden noise, and he would pause, calming it with gentle words and steady hands. Feeding the dragon became an exercise in observation. Its body had unusual needs, and he had to experiment with portions, temperature, and consistency of the paste to find what it could safely eat. At first, it refused much of what he offered, shaking its head and emitting faint hisses. But with patience, he found ways to encourage it, leaving small portions on soft padding, letting it approach in its own time, and speaking reassuringly while he waited. Every time it ate, he felt a spark of hope. Every time it refused, he felt a pang of worry. The engineer also noticed signs of intelligence in the baby dragon. Its eyes followed his movements in a deliberate way, and it seemed to understand simple gestures, like when he pointed to the paste or gestured for it to move away from the edge of the platform. It could respond with subtle sounds, soft chirps, and small bursts of smoke, almost as if it was testing communication. The engineer found himself fascinated. He realized this creature, abandoned and weak, had instincts and intelligence beyond what he had first imagined. He had never worked with living beings in this way before. Machines could be repaired, programmed, or replaced, but life, especially alien life, required care, attention, and respect. As days passed, he began to notice its growing strength. Its wings, once small and frail, now twitched more confidently. Its legs seemed steadier, its claws sharper, and its eyes brighter. Yet there were moments of fear. Strange noises from the ship would make it cower. Small flames would escape from its nostrils in warning, and it occasionally snapped at sudden movements. Each time, the engineer was careful to remain calm, showing patience rather than punishment. He had learned long ago that trust could not be forced, only earned. One evening, as the ship's artificial lighting dimmed to mimic a nighttime cycle, the engineer heard another sound. This time, it was different, a low rumble, almost like a distant growl, echoing through the metal corridors. The baby dragon stiffened instantly, its small body tense. The engineer froze beside it, listening closely. The ship was old, and the noise could have been mechanical, a failing engine or a moving panel. But the dragon's reaction told him it sensed something else. It was alert, sniffing the air, its small body coiled as if preparing to defend itself. The engineer realized that despite its size, the creature had instincts. It had been born into a world where danger was constant, and those instincts were still sharp. He felt a mix of admiration and responsibility. Here was a life that had endured neglect and abandonment, yet it was resilient and aware. He had no choice but to respect that strength while protecting it. He spoke in a soft, calm voice, letting the dragon hear the reassurance in his tone. "It's all right. I'm here. Nothing will hurt you." Over time, a routine formed. Feeding, cleaning, observing, and gentle play became their days. The engineer crafted small platforms and padded areas using spare materials from the ship, creating safe spaces where the dragon could rest and move freely. He watched it explore, fascinated by its curiosity. It sniffed at panels, nudged buttons with claws, and occasionally released small puffs of heat, testing its abilities. He realized that this creature was not just a passive dependent. It was learning, adapting, and becoming stronger under his care. Even as the bond deepened, the engineer remained aware of the risks. The dragon could be unpredictable, especially if startled or threatened. He had to maintain vigilance, knowing that one wrong move could result in injury for either of them. There were moments of tension when the dragon suddenly leapt or emitted flames, and he had to react quickly, not with fear, but with control and care. These moments were stressful, but they also reinforced the growing connection. Each time they navigated a small danger together, their trust strengthened. One afternoon, he discovered the first small signs of affection. The baby dragon approached him without hesitation, nuzzling his hand with its tiny snout. Its eyes, wide and alert, met his, and he felt a spark of connection that went beyond survival. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it meant that the dragon recognized him not as a threat, but as a protector, a companion. The engineer allowed himself a quiet smile. It was a small, fragile bond, but it was real. As days turned into a week, he reflected on how much had changed. When he first found the baby dragon, it was chained, weak, and fearful, abandoned to die. Now it moved with cautious confidence, ate with some regularity, and even responded to gestures and voice. He knew the journey ahead would be long and dangerous, but the first step had been taken. The creature was alive, and it was beginning to trust him. Night fell again, and he watched the dragon curl up in its padded corner, finally relaxed enough to rest. He felt a sense of purpose he hadn't known before. This wasn't just about survival in the cold void of space. It was about compassion, connection, and the silent promise to protect a life that had been discarded. He knew there would be more challenges, more tests of patience and courage, but for now, he allowed himself to rest alongside his companion, feeling a small spark of hope in the vast emptiness around them. In the quiet, as the ship drifted endlessly through space, the engineer understood something profound. Machines could be fixed and replaced, but life required care, empathy, and commitment. The bond he had begun to form with the baby dragon was fragile, but it was real, and it gave him a reason to keep moving forward. Out here, far from home, in a universe that could be indifferent or even hostile. The connection between two beings, a human and an alien creature, was a small but powerful victory. And so, the days continued, each one building on the last. Every feed, every gentle touch, every cautious exploration of the ship was a step toward trust, toward survival, toward something new. The engineer didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt that he and the baby dragon were not entirely alone. Together, they had begun a journey that was far bigger than either of them, a journey of care, courage, and the quiet miracle of life surviving against all odds. The following days brought a sense of routine. though the engineer knew that life aboard the abandoned alien ship was never truly predictable. The baby dragon, now stronger and more alert, followed him with increasing confidence. Its small wings twitched as it moved, and its eyes, a mix of amber and gold, seemed almost to shine with curiosity. The creature was no longer simply surviving. It was learning, testing its surroundings, and exploring cautiously. The engineer watched every move, careful not to rush it, knowing that trust could only grow through patience. He spent hours observing how it reacted to the strange environment. The dragon's instincts were sharp. Whenever a section of the ship creaked or flickered, it would stiffen, emitting a small puff of smoke, as if warning both itself and the engineer. Sometimes it hissed and snapped at shadows or reflections, and the engineer learned quickly that this was not aggression, but instinct. The ship was unfamiliar to both of them, full of strange noises, flickering lights, and sharp metal edges. He had to keep his own nerves steady while guiding the dragon through the maze-like corridors. Feeding continued to be a careful process. The engineer experimented with different consistencies of nutrient paste, observing how the creature reacted. At first, it refused some portions, shaking its head or emitting a low hiss. Slowly, it began to accept larger amounts and even started to anticipate feeding times. The engineer noticed small changes in behavior. It would approach him without hesitation, tilt its head when he spoke softly, and occasionally nuzzle his hand. These were small but important signs that the bond was growing. He couldn't help but smile at these moments, feeling a rare sense of companionship in the vast loneliness of space. Despite these small victories, the engineer knew the ship was not safe. Its systems were old, many wires exposed, panels sparking, and occasional alarms went off without reason. Every step through the corridors required caution. He taught the baby dragon to stay close and follow simple cues, using gestures and soft sounds to guide it away from dangerous areas. At first, it was hesitant, sometimes darting off or hissing when startled. But gradually, it began to trust his directions, responding almost instinctively to his gestures. This gave him hope that, together, they could face even greater dangers. One day, while exploring the engineering section, the engineer noticed a faint glow coming from one of the ship's central corridors. It pulsed softly, like a heartbeat. He moved closer, the baby dragon at his side, ears and wings alert. The glow came from a damaged energy core, flickering erratically. Sparks jumped from exposed conduits, and a low humming vibration filled the air. The engineer's heart sank. If the core failed completely, the ship could lose power, and both of them would be in serious danger. He carefully instructed the dragon to stay back, speaking in calm, measured tones. The creature watched, its amber eyes alert, but it did not move closer. Using tools from his pack, he began to stabilize the core, working slowly to avoid triggering any dangerous reactions. Sweat ran down his face under the dim lights as he rewired circuits, patched leaks, and tested the connections. All the while, the dragon sat quietly, as if sensing the importance of the task. For the first time, the engineer felt a deep sense of partnership. The dragon was more than a creature he had saved. It was a companion who shared in the dangers of this ship. After hours of careful work, the core stabilized. The glow evened out, and the hum of the ship's systems became steady once more. The engineer let out a long sigh of relief, patting the dragon gently on its small head. The creature responded with a soft chirp, nuzzling his hand. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. They had faced danger together and survived. The engineer realized that trust and companionship were now as crucial to their survival as any tool or piece of equipment. As days turned into weeks, the bond between human and dragon deepened. The engineer found himself talking to it more, sharing thoughts and observations aloud, even though the creature could not understand human words. Somehow, The dragon seemed to respond to tone and body language, tilting its head, hissing softly, or curling closer when he spoke kindly. He began to understand the creature's subtle cues. A flick of its tail meant curiosity, a small hiss indicated fear, and a gentle nuzzle showed comfort. Communication, though limited, was growing. The baby dragon also began to display abilities he had not fully noticed before. Small flames, once occasional, now appeared more controlled. It experimented with its wings, flapping weakly at first, but gradually gaining strength. Sometimes it would emit soft chirps combined with bursts of smoke, almost as if testing the limits of its own abilities. The engineer watched in awe. This little creature, once abandoned and shamed, was discovering its own potential. And he knew that it was his responsibility to guide and protect it, not suppress or punish it. But there were moments of tension as well. One afternoon, a sudden electrical surge from the ship startled the baby dragon. It hissed loudly, flames escaping its nostrils, and its body tensed. The engineer reacted quickly, raising a hand and speaking calmly, guiding it back to a safe area. He realized that the creature's instincts were both a gift and a risk. Its abilities could protect them in danger, but if uncontrolled, they could also cause harm. Patience, vigilance, and careful guidance were now more important than ever. Through these interactions, the engineer also learned more about himself. He had always relied on logic, skill, and technical knowledge to navigate life and work. But caring for the dragon required more than that. It required empathy, patience, and the ability to read emotions that were not human. Each day, he became more attuned to the creature's needs, its fears, and its subtle expressions. It was a kind of learning that no book or training could provide. He realized that survival in this strange abandoned ship depended not just on technology, but on compassion and connection. One evening, as the ship's dim lights flickered, he noticed the dragon resting more confidently, its small body relaxed. It had begun to trust the environment as much as it trusted him. He allowed himself a moment to reflect. When he first found the baby dragon, it had been chained, weak, and fearful. Now it moved with cautious confidence, eating regularly, and even responding to his gestures and voice. Their journey together was still dangerous, and the future uncertain, but the first steps toward trust and companionship had been taken. He realized that their relationship had shifted. The baby dragon was no longer simply a creature in need of saving. It was a partner in survival, a being with its own instincts, abilities, and intelligence. Together, they had faced danger, uncertainty, and fear. And through these shared experiences, a bond had formed that went beyond simple care. It was trust, respect, and even affection. As he watched the dragon curl up for rest, he understood the weight of what he had undertaken. Protecting this life was not a temporary duty. It was a commitment. The engineer knew that challenges would continue to arise. The ship was unstable, resources were limited, and the galaxy beyond was unpredictable. But he also knew that the small victories, the trust earned, the meals shared, the moments of calm in the chaos were just as important as any technical fix or survival strategy. Night fell over the drifting ship, and he sat beside the baby dragon, feeling a rare sense of companionship in the vast loneliness of space. The little creature, once abandoned and alone, had begun to thrive under his care. Its eyes followed him with quiet curiosity, and he spoke softly, as much for his own comfort as for the dragon's. "We'll face whatever comes together," he whispered. It was a promise, though he knew neither of them could fully understand the words. Still, the bond was real, formed in shared survival and care, in the quiet of the abandoned ship, surrounded by flickering lights and distant stars. The engineer realized something important. Machines could be repaired, systems could be restored, and technology could be mastered. But life, especially fragile, abandoned life, required something different: attention, empathy, and courage. He had learned that protecting a life, even one so different from his own, could be more challenging and rewarding than any technical task he had ever faced. And so, the days continued. Each day brought feeding, gentle care, exploration, and small lessons in trust and communication. The baby dragon grew stronger, its instincts sharper, and its curiosity bolder. The engineer became more patient, more attuned, and more aware of the responsibilities that came with companionship. Together, they were learning to survive, not just in the physical sense, but in a deeper, more profound way, learning to trust, to care, and to protect one another in a world that had once abandoned them both. The days that followed brought a sense of growing confidence for both the engineer and the baby dragon, but the calm was deceptive. The ship was old, abandoned, and unpredictable, and they were far from any help. The engineer knew that their safety depended on constant vigilance. It was no longer just about feeding and caring for the dragon. It was about navigating the dangers hidden within the alien ship itself. One morning, as he checked the ship's systems, he noticed subtle changes. The lights flickered more often, the hum of the engines grew uneven, and certain sections of the ship, previously silent, now emitted strange mechanical noises. He frowned, recognizing these as signs of failing systems. The baby dragon, perched nearby, tilted its head at the noises, its small wings twitching nervously. He realized that the creature sensed danger before he did, its instincts sharper than any human analysis. He decided to investigate. Walking carefully down the narrow corridors, he held a small tool in his hand, ready to repair or defend. The baby dragon followed closely, moving with growing confidence, but still alert. The first danger revealed itself in the form of a series of automated security drones. They had been left on the ship to maintain order, but had malfunctioned after the ship was abandoned. At first, they hovered silently, motionless. Then, as the engineer passed, their sensors detected movement, and they whirred to life with a series of low beeps and glowing lights. The baby dragon reacted immediately. Its small body tensed, and it let out a sharp hiss, flames flickering from its nostrils. The engineer raised a hand, signaling it to stay calm, though he knew that controlling the creature was as important as avoiding the drones. He studied the drones carefully. They were not designed to kill, but they were programmed to neutralize intruders. Their metal arms moved with precision, and their sensors glowed red as they tracked his movements. He took a deep breath and began to think. He could try to disable them manually, but approaching them too quickly could trigger a defensive response. Instead, he used the environment. Shadows, metal crates, and debris became tools to block sensors and confuse the drones. The baby dragon, sensing his plan, crouched low and followed his lead. At first, it was hesitant, skittering behind crates, but gradually it matched his movements, moving almost instinctively through the maze of obstacles. A sudden beep made the engineer freeze. One of the drones had detected a shadow moving across its sensor. Its metal arm swung, aiming toward them. The baby dragon reacted instinctively, letting out a small puff of fire, just enough to short-circuit the drone's sensor. Sparks flew, and the drone spun erratically before shutting down. The engineer's heart raced. He realized that the creature's instincts were now a critical part of their survival. He whispered quietly, "Good job. Stay close." The dragon responded with a soft hiss, acknowledging his words in its own way. As they moved deeper into the ship, more drones activated. Each time, the engineer had to think quickly, guiding the dragon while avoiding the drone sensors and arms. The baby dragon's small size and agility were an advantage. It could dart between obstacles, leap over cables, and even use bursts of smoke to distract the drones. The engineer used these moments to disable the drone's power course, carefully avoiding direct confrontation. It was tense work, but together they began to make progress. Hours passed, and the corridor felt endless. Sweat dripped from the engineer's brow as he navigated the maze, repairing broken panels and using tools to block sensors. The baby dragon followed without hesitation now, moving with confidence, its eyes alert for any sudden danger. It had learned to trust the engineer's commands, and in turn, he trusted its instincts. They were no longer simply surviving. They were working as a team, each learning from the other. Eventually, they reached the ship's main control room. The room was larger, with banks of alien consoles flickering and sparking. The drones had not followed this far, likely due to a system error, giving them a moment of relative safety. The engineer took a deep breath, allowing himself a brief pause. The baby dragon curled at his feet, watching him carefully, its small body radiating alertness, even in a rare moment of calm. He needed to stabilize the ship's core systems. The energy supply was fluctuating dangerously, and if it failed, they could be trapped in the drifting ship or worse. He moved quickly, checking readings and repairing circuits, while the baby dragon watched, occasionally nudging small tools or curious pieces of debris with its snout. He realized that the creature was more than a companion. It was a partner in survival. Its presence gave him focus, courage, and an unspoken reassurance that he was not alone in this strange, abandoned vessel. Hours turned into a tense night as he worked. Sparks flew from the panels, alarms beeped sporadically, and the baby dragon occasionally hissed, reacting to each surge of energy. He spoke to it softly, guiding its movements, reassuring it that they were safe. Every success in repairing the ship brought a small victory, but he knew the real danger was still out there. The ship was old, unstable, and filled with unknown threats. In the early hours, as he completed a critical repair, a sudden tremor shook the floor. Panels rattled, and sparks flew across the room. The baby dragon hissed, flames flickering from its nostrils in warning. He realized that another system was failing, one connected to the ship's propulsion. If it went completely offline, they could be stranded in deep space with no way to return. He acted quickly, using tools and quick thinking to reroute power, stabilize the systems, and prevent a catastrophic failure. The dragon stayed close, moving instinctively to shield him from falling debris and dangerous sparks. By the time the systems were stable again, both were exhausted. The engineer leaned against a console, breathing heavily, while the baby dragon curled at his feet, finally allowing itself a moment of rest. He looked at the creature and smiled, feeling a deep sense of connection. They had faced real danger together, survived threats from both the ship and its malfunctioning defenses, and strengthened their bond through shared experience. As the day began, the engineer realized something important. The baby dragon was not just a creature in need of saving. It had become an active participant in their survival. Its instincts, agility, and growing confidence were vital. And in turn, he had learned patience, empathy, and the importance of partnership. Together, they were stronger than either could be alone. He knew that more challenges were coming. The ship was old, the systems unstable, and the galaxy outside could hold unknown dangers. But for now, they had survived another day. The engineer spoke softly to the dragon. "We're okay for now. We'll rest and face the next challenge together." The creature chirped softly in response, nuzzling his hand. It was a small gesture, but it carried trust, recognition, and a sense of shared purpose. As the sun or what passed for light on the drifting ship dimmed, the engineer watched the baby dragon sleep. Its small body, once chained and abandoned, was now free, alert, and growing stronger every day. He reflected on how much had changed. Trust had been built, danger had been faced, and a bond had been formed that neither time nor distance could easily break dot in the quiet. With the hum of the ship as the only sound, the engineer realized something profound. True survival was not just about technology, skill, or knowledge. It was about connection, trust, and the willingness to face danger together. The baby dragon had taught him lessons about courage, patience, and empathy that no manual or training could ever provide. And he had learned that life, even when small, fragile, or alien, was worth protecting at all costs. And so, as the ship drifted silently through the void, the engineer and the baby dragon rested, ready to face whatever came next. Together, they had survived the first real threat. Together, they had learned that danger could be met with patience, teamwork, and trust. And in the vast, lonely emptiness of space, that bond was more powerful than any machine, weapon, or system the universe could throw at them. The days that followed the ship's malfunctions were quieter, but the engineer knew it was only a temporary calm. He could feel it in the vibrations of the ship, the faint creaks of the metal, and the occasional flicker of lights. The baby dragon had grown stronger, more confident, and its instincts had sharpened even further. But he knew that surviving on this old, abandoned vessel was not a long-term solution. At some point, he would have to leave, or the ship itself would fail, leaving them stranded in the vast emptiness of space. He spent hours studying the ship's navigation systems, many of which were alien and unlike anything he had worked with before. Some panels flickered, others displayed strange symbols he could not decipher. He tried to piece together enough information to chart a course back to human space, knowing that every calculation had to be precise. Even a small error could leave them lost for months, with dwindling supplies and no help nearby. The baby dragon, curious as ever, followed him through the control room, its wings twitching as it explored. He had grown used to its presence, finding comfort in its small movements, the way it tilted its head or chirped softly as he worked. The decision weighed heavily on him. Leaving the ship meant exposing the baby dragon to dangers it had never faced before, dangers in the unknown space beyond. But staying meant risking failure of the ship's systems, starvation, or worse. He looked at the creature curled beside him, its amber eyes watching his every move, and realized that leaving was inevitable. They had grown too attached to the vessel to consider it a long-term home. It was a temporary shelter, a place to recover and build trust. But the real journey lay ahead. Preparation became his priority. He gathered supplies, nutrient paste, water, spare tools, and whatever alien devices he could adapt for their journey. The baby dragon watched closely, learning through observation. Sometimes it would paw at a container, sniffing curiously, as if understanding that these items were important. The engineer smiled at its curiosity, feeling a mix of pride and responsibility. He had never thought of himself as a caretaker before, but now every action he took was for the well-being of another being. Training the dragon was another challenge. While it had grown strong, its instincts were still raw, unpredictable. It could control its small flames better, move with agility, and even respond to his simple gestures. But it was still a wild creature in many ways. He spent hours teaching it to follow commands, to stay close during movement, and to trust his guidance. At first, it resisted, flinching at loud noises or unexpected motions. But with patience and gentle encouragement, it began to understand that he was a protector, not a threat. One evening, as the ship floated silently through the void, he realized that leaving was imminent. He had calculated the safest trajectory back to human space, accounting for fuel, energy, and navigation constraints. But as he prepared the ship, a wave of doubt hit him. The baby dragon was small, vulnerable, and inexperienced with travel outside this abandoned ship. What if something went wrong? What if he couldn't protect it in time? He paused, placing a hand on its shimmering scales, feeling the warmth and life beneath his fingers. "I promise I'll keep you safe," he whispered, knowing that while it might not understand the words, it would sense the intention. As the day of departure arrived, he carefully secured the baby dragon in a padded area of the ship, creating a small platform with restraints that were soft but secure enough to prevent injury during turbulence. The creature watched him silently, its amber eyes alert, but it did not resist. He had earned its trust, and now that trust would be tested in the challenges ahead. He double-checked systems, fuel levels, and navigation, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing on him. Every decision mattered, and failure could mean the end of both their lives. When the engines powered up, the ship shuddered under the strain. Lights flickered, and the hum of machinery filled the corridors. The baby dragon hissed softly, flames flickering from its nostrils, but did not panic. It had learned that sudden sounds and movements were not always threats, and that he was there to guide it. The engineer took a deep breath, feeling a surge of determination. They had survived abandonment, malfunctioning drones, and failing systems. Now they would face the unknown of space together. The journey began slowly, the ship gliding through the void with careful precision. The baby dragon watched the stars through small observation ports, its curiosity piqued by the endless expanse outside. The engineer monitored navigation, fuel, and energy consumption, adjusting the course with careful calculations. Every time a warning light flashed or a system sputtered, he acted quickly, sometimes calling on the baby dragon to stay calm or move to a safer position. The bond between them was evident in these moments. Each relied on the other in ways neither had experienced before. Days passed in a tense rhythm. The baby dragon grew accustomed to the movement of the ship, learning to balance on its padded platform. Its instincts remained sharp, alerting him to small vibrations, noises, and fluctuations in the ship's systems. The engineer relied on these instincts, sometimes discovering problems he would have otherwise missed. Together, they navigated asteroid fields, avoided unstable space debris, and corrected course through gravitational anomalies. Each challenge strengthened their partnership and built confidence in the little creature's abilities. Despite the constant vigilance, there were moments of quiet. The baby dragon would curl up beside him during periods of rest, and he would talk softly about their next steps, the stars, and the hope of reaching home. These moments were precious, reminders that even in the vast, indifferent void of space, life and connection could thrive. He realized that survival was not just about skill or technology. It was about patience, empathy, and trust. The baby dragon had taught him lessons he had never anticipated, and he had taught it, in turn, the value of guidance, protection, and companionship. However, the journey was not without danger. One day, a sudden surge in the ship's engines caused a jolt that threw loose objects across the control room. The baby dragon hissed, flames flicking dangerously close to sensitive panels. The engineer acted immediately, stabilizing the engines and shielding the creature from falling debris. He spoke in soothing tones, guiding it to a safer area and reassuring it that they were okay. The experience was a reminder that despite preparation, space travel was inherently unpredictable. They had to remain alert, adaptable, and ready for anything. As the days continued, the engineer reflected on the bond they had formed. The baby dragon, once abandoned and weak, had grown stronger, more confident, and deeply connected to him. He understood its instincts, its behaviors, and its ways of communicating. In turn, the dragon had learned to trust him, to follow his guidance, and even to respond to subtle gestures. They had survived not through force or luck alone, but through cooperation, understanding, and mutual respect. One evening, as the ship drifted through a quiet section of space, the engineer watched the baby dragon explore the observation deck. It moved with grace, its small wings fluttering, and it occasionally puffed small bursts of smoke in fascination. He realized that this creature, once left to die, was now thriving in an environment far from its original home. It had adapted, learned, and grown under his care. And he had changed as well. He was no longer just a solitary engineer, focused on systems and repairs. He was a protector, a teacher, and a companion. Together, they were more than survivors. They were a team, bound by trust and experience. But he also knew that the real test lay ahead. Human space was far away, and the journey through unknown regions held unpredictable challenges. The ship's systems were still fragile, and supplies were limited. Every decision could mean the difference between life and death. He tightened his focus, knowing that the safety of the baby dragon and himself depended on careful planning, constant vigilance, and the bond they had built through hardship and care. And so, as the ship continued its journey toward human territory, the engineer and the baby dragon remained alert, aware, and connected. The future was uncertain, but their partnership was real. They had survived abandonment, learned to trust, and faced dangers together. Now, as they traveled through the endless void, they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that together they could endure anything. The journey through the vastness of space stretched on for days. The engineer and the baby dragon had settled into a rhythm, moving cautiously through the ship, monitoring the systems and keeping each other safe. The little dragon had grown stronger, more confident, and its movements were more precise. Its small wings flapped occasionally, just enough to test the air and keep balance during the ship's maneuvers. The engineer had come to rely on its instincts. The creature's sharp senses often alerted him to minor system malfunctions or changes in gravity before his eyes. Instruments could detect anything. It had become more than a companion, it was a partner. A small but powerful presence in the lonely expanse. The ship's navigation systems, though still unstable, were finally functioning well enough to plot a direct course toward human space. It was a long journey, with weeks stretching ahead, and the engineer knew they had to remain vigilant. Supplies were limited, and the little dragon still required careful care and feeding. Yet, despite the uncertainty, there was a sense of hope. The engineer looked over the creature, resting on a padded platform. Its amber eyes followed his every movement, a mixture of curiosity and trust reflecting in their depth. He realized how far they had come from a fragile, chained infant left to die to a confident, alert being capable of helping navigate a dangerous environment. As the days passed, the engineer observed the dragon's growth with a mix of pride and awe. It had begun to learn from his movements, following his gestures and responding to his soft-spoken words. He had taught it small commands, guiding it through navigation exercises, safety drills, and even simple maintenance tasks. The little creature was eager to understand and assist, tilting its head, twitching its wings, or emitting small puffs of smoke when he gave a signal. These gestures, once chaotic and uncontrolled, were now deliberate. The engineer smiled quietly to himself. Trust and partnership had taken root, growing stronger each day in the isolation of deep space. Despite these small victories, danger remained. The ship's old engines occasionally sputtered, causing jolts that sent small tools and debris skittering across the floor. The baby dragon reacted instantly in these moments, leaping or curling defensively, flames flickering briefly in alarm. The engineer had to maintain calm, guiding the creature and keeping both of them safe. It was a delicate balance training, and nurturing the dragon while also managing the ship's fragile systems and plotting a safe course. But the bond they shared gave him strength, and he noticed that the dragon now instinctively sought to protect him as much as he protected it. One morning, as they drifted past a dense asteroid belt, the ship shuddered violently. Small meteors had collided with the outer hull, rattling the ship and setting off alarms. The engineer shouted for the dragon to stay low, and it immediately crouched, flames flickering as a warning. Debris bounced across the floors, and sparks flew from damaged panels. He moved quickly, securing loose tools and checking the hull's integrity. The dragon stayed close, its small body tense but ready to respond. He realized that these shared moments of danger had forged a deeper connection between them. Each challenge they faced together strengthened the trust, transforming fear into teamwork. Navigating through the asteroid belt was tense. The engineer had to make split-second calculations, adjusting the ship's course while avoiding collisions. The baby dragon responded to subtle gestures, moving to maintain balance and occasionally using small bursts of flame to signal changes in the environment. Together, they adapted, relying on a combination of human skill and instinctual awareness. Hours later, they emerged from the belt unscathed, exhausted but triumphant. The engineer sank into a chair, watching the dragon explore a small observation deck. Its amber eyes reflected the distant stars, curious and alive. For the first time in weeks, there was a sense of calm, a fleeting but precious moment of peace. During these moments, the engineer reflected on their journey. He had saved this fragile life, but in truth, the little dragon had saved him in ways he hadn't anticipated. It had given him purpose, companionship, and a reason to keep moving forward despite uncertainty. The creature had transformed from a symbol of vulnerability into a partner capable of learning, responding, and even assisting in survival. Each day spent together had been a lesson in patience, empathy, and courage. He had learned that connection and trust were as important as technical skill when facing the unknown dot as they continued through space. The engineer began making plans for when they finally reached human territory. He knew that others might not understand or accept the dragon immediately. It was an alien species, unfamiliar and potentially frightening. But he was determined to find a safe place where it could thrive, where it would not be confined or harmed. He also knew that he could not leave it alone in the universe, not after all they had been through. The dragon had become a part of his life, a companion whose trust and affection were as real as any human bond. One day, as they neared the edge of human-monitored space, an unexpected problem arose. A sudden solar flare disrupted the ship's energy systems, causing lights to flicker and panels to spark dangerously. The engineer acted quickly, stabilizing the power and guiding the dragon to a safe corner. The creature responded instinctively, curling around him protectively and emitting small bursts of smoke to shield from sparks. The event was brief but intense, and the engineer felt a deep sense of gratitude for the dragon's instincts. Together, they had faced danger, adapted, and survived, and that experience only strengthened their bond. Finally, after weeks of careful navigation, the ship's sensors picked up signs of human outposts and supply stations. Relief washed over the engineer. The journey had been long, dangerous, and exhausting, but they were no longer alone in the vast emptiness of space. He gently tapped the dragon, signaling that they were approaching safety. The little creature chirped softly, nudging his hand, a small but unmistakable gesture of shared relief. They had survived abandonment, danger, and uncertainty, and now a new chapter awaited, one of safety, growth, and understanding. As the ship approached the nearest human station, the engineer began preparing for docking. He ensured the dragon's padded area was secure, shielding it from sudden movements. It watched the approaching structures with a mix of curiosity and caution, its wings twitching slightly as it adjusted to the unfamiliar sights. The engineer spoke softly, reassuring it that they were almost home. The bond between them, formed in the solitude and danger of space, had prepared them to face this final step together. Docking was tense. The station's automated systems scanned the ship, and unfamiliar protocols required careful handling. The engineer worked quickly, adjusting controls and communicating with the station as best he could. The baby dragon stayed close, its presence a calming force amidst the tension. When the ship finally locked into position and the automated doors opened, the engineer let out a quiet sigh of relief. They had made it. Against the odds, they had survived every challenge and reached safety. The first steps outside the ship were cautious. The station personnel stared at the little dragon, surprised by its unusual appearance. It hissed softly, flames flickering lightly as a defensive instinct. The engineer stayed close, speaking softly, guiding the creature, showing it that these humans were not threats. Slowly, it relaxed, trusting him to lead the way. He could see that the bond they had formed in the loneliness of space was strong enough to withstand even this new, unfamiliar environment. The engineer found a secure area within the station, a space where the dragon could rest, eat, and explore without fear. He provided food, warmth, and comfort, just as he had during their journey. The little dragon, once abandoned and weak, now moved with confidence, exploring its surroundings, stretching its wings, and even testing small bursts of flame in controlled ways. The engineer watched with pride and awe. They had survived abandonment, danger, and the unknown, and now the creature was thriving under his care. In the quiet moments, he reflected on their journey. From the first discovery of the chained, frightened infant to this moment of safety and trust, everything had changed. The baby dragon had taught him lessons about patience, empathy, courage, and companionship, and he had taught it trust, safety, and resilience. Together, they had faced impossible odds, and together they had survived. The bond between them was no longer fragile, it was unbreakable, forged through shared challenges and triumphs. As night fell over the station, the engineer watched the little dragon curl up beside him. Its small body radiated warmth and trust, a living reminder of the journey they had endured. He knew that life beyond the station would bring new challenges, new learning, and new adventures. But he also knew that they would face them together, strengthened by trust, connection, and the unshakable bond they had built in the lonely void of space. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to feel hope, not just for survival, but for life, growth, and the future. The little dragon, once abandoned and left to die, now had a protector, a companion, and a home. And he, in turn, had found purpose, companionship, and a reason to keep moving forward in a universe that often felt indifferent. And so, as they rested together, the engineer realized something profound. Survival was not just about skill, technology, or